Welcome to the Bedrock Way podcast, where we're changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. And Jonathan, do we have a surprise for our listeners today? 2 days ago, I got stuck in the tsunami of the year. And I was driving back from Philly, and I was driving in a monsoon, and one of my guests reached out to me that night. My personal doctor, Dr. Pecora, said, "Hey, bud, did you get home all right?" And as I'm driving through that tsunami, I'm thinking to myself, man, I just want to make it home in one piece. So I didn't use my phone. I looked at the road, and I made it home an hour and a half later. And then today, this morning, as I'm driving here, the sun was shining. And it made me think about, with every storm, with every sometimes low light in our life, the sun will always shine the next day. And I wanted to make the same analogy, Jonathan, to medicine that has just undergone one of its biggest storms and has come out of it. And I do believe that the two guests that we have today are a shining light that the best days of healthcare are yet ahead of us. And while they both took a different trajectory to becoming medical doctors, they both share the same passion today. And while they both practice in a different realm, you guys know Dr. Pecora well. He's become our celebrity doctor here at Bedrock Healthcare at Home. He is our lead medical director, what I call our chief medical officer, and he has undertaken the incredible revolutionary task of being the change agent for medical care. He touts the best return to hospitalization rates in the region at 9% with medical care and 2.1% with our technology. And my other guest I have today is Dr. Kiplee Bell, a distinguished physician who took a much untraditional path to becoming a physician. But she's making an impact in her world, and she's empowering creativity and challenging the status quo as it refers to concierge medical model delivery. These two guests are not standing in the sidelines and waiting for healthcare and medicine to change. They are affecting change themselves. The title of today's podcast is From Good to Great, the impact of clinician leadership on patient care. It is my pleasure to welcome to the Bedrock Way podcast, Dr. Andrew Pecora and Dr. Kiplee Bell. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Good morning.
What an intro. Wow.
Listen, I am excited. I gotta be honest, I am excited. I woke up this morning, I went to bed early, which usually I don't do. I went to bed early. I got my 8 hours of sleep that Dr. Pecora is always telling me I need to have, but I rarely have because I'm always thinking. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure is that I highlighted your incredible trajectory to medicine. Dr. Kiplee has been in the medical field for over 20 years, beginning as a hospital volunteer and evolving through board certification as a physician assistant and onto her status as medical doctor. She is amongst the less than 2% of women of color in medicine who has achieved the credential. Equipped with an additional master's degree in gerontology, she enjoys leading her colleagues in the care of elderly clients. Please visit www.impactfulcaregiving.com to learn more. Her training and degrees held from the College of New Jersey. My brother went there, by the way. St. Joseph's University, Drexel College of Medicine, and the International University of Health Sciences. She has long-standing clinical experience and acumen in the subspecialties of rheumatology and emergency medicine. Currently, she serves as a consultant for new medical developments, lectures internationally, and continues to serve and maintain a solid patient roster. A member of the Screen Actors Guild, she's also an accomplished performer. She has utilized her vocal talent to perform on local and national stages. Maybe I'll have you sing today for me.
I knew that was happening.
Her fondest memories include performing in musical theater, commercials, and film, as well as her year as Miss Philadelphia in 1998 with the Miss America organizations. I don't think the Eagles were very good back then. She is a sought-after audiobook narrator. To learn more, please visit www.KipleeBell.com. She met her husband on a film set and is a proud mother of 2 boys. Being a mother is her greatest gift. Rooted in philanthropy, she is the founder and CEO of the Kevin John McAleese Memorial Scholarship Foundation, www.kevinjohnmcaleesefoundation.org. Dr. Bell has the humble responsibility for the attraction, engagement, development, and experience of the Foundation's most important asset, its people. She champions the mission of the organization by keeping the legacy of Colonel Macaulay's intact. As an experienced clinician, lecturer, and performer, Dr. Kiplee believes that the unique intersection of art and science begins with the human connection. Boy, I love that. The stage is essentially the same, a sacred place to inform, educate, advocate, connect, and heal. Her most recent venture is as the CEO and proud founder of www.impactfulcare.com. Dr. Bell, that is an impressive resume. Tell me a little bit about Impactful Care so our audience understands how to access it and the story behind it.
Okay, so I'll begin with the story. I was legit on a camel in Egypt.
Okay.
Legit on a camel in Egypt, and I was looking at the pyramids to my left, and I'm on this camel, and I'm just overcome with emotion at God's earth. I love to travel, but so I was on this camel, and I was really feeling overwhelmed in medicine, frankly. And I just said, I just want to give impactful care. Like, is that hard? Like, I just want to give impactful care. I'm tired of being a cog on a wheel. I just want to be able to care for patients well on my own terms, blah, blah, blah. And I came back, sat with a business coach, and, I said, I want to call it impactful care. And so care is a hybrid brand. It is a fee for service, and I've gotten the calling from patients to please accept insurance in those regards. So I do a fee for service for those that are uninsured or want more concierge offerings but beyond what their insurance offers. And we also accept Medicare, the top 5, Medicare, Aetna, United, TRICARE, and Blues. And the 4 pillars are your standard telehealth, workplace wellness, which is fun. So this is where I come to a corporate environment. We teach prevention and wellness, and we do on-site health screenings, diabetes to COVID and everything in between. And the 3rd pillar is also fun, where I integrate my show business background. Set and production services needs everything that medical patient needs. When they're filming a movie or a commercial, what have you, they need to make sure that their actors are safe. So we do television and film set production, medical services, screening the actors, so forth. And then lastly is my heart, which is the impactful care of your aging loved one. And so this is concierge service for the older adult person to do house calls, which I love, or extended telehealth visits that includes the caregiver and family. So this is where I integrate the educational portion, which is impactful caregiving, and I empower the patient to say, how do you function at bedside? What are the questions that you ask your clinician? How are you the mouthpiece for your mom and pops when they can't? Or how do you let your mom and pops have a voice? Bridle your tongue, let your doctor hear directly from them what their pain points are while still advocating for them in the meantime. So it's a brand, it's building, and I'm excited about it.
Please tell the audience how you became a physician, a very untraditional path, but one that I believe makes it more rewarding to be where you are.
Absolutely. When I reflect on your words, I think about how my future has been behind me. So we come into this new year, we're like, what are our resolutions? What's my future? But when I think about my own path in medicine, I think about how the future for me has been behind me and began with my single mom, single divorced parent. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old, and my mother is a retired registered nurse. And she was, at that time, she's a registered nurse midwife, but she left obstetrics to do private home duty nursing so that she could accommodate me as a child. And she took care of a gentleman who had dementia, who stowed away on a boat when he was 9 from Italy.
Wow.
And all he knew how to do was write his name.
Was it my grandfather?
And he became a billionaire entrepreneur in the olive business. But I watched my mother caregive a man that became imposed with dementia. And I learned very important caregiving skill set, early on. Even as a child, now in hindsight, I can see that I learned the impact and power that impactful care has on families, interpersonal communication, that you have compassionate care and you have compassion and care.
Love it.
So those were the early lessons learned in my trajectory. Volunteered. Mr. Albert DaCosta passed away at 97. At that time, I was in college. Went on to complete my degree in biology and then obtain a master's degree in gerontology. Always had a heart for the older population. And then I went on to physician assistant and spent decades of my life in emergency medicine and rheumatology. And then I decided to go back to medical school and obtain my doctorate. So volunteering at the bedside, working amongst teams, understanding that my colleagues on whatever level may be exhausted, that patients are exhausted, that I can still be a team player. I know how to change a bed and I can help you out if you're in cardiac arrest. And understanding that that is transparent leadership. That I am you and you are me. That we need to change this paradigm shift from I'm the doctor and you're the patient to we're one.
So you mentioned something very, very, and I'm going to keep using impactful. That's going to be the adverb
of the day.
And my audience will know why. Dr. Bell is the CEO and founder of Impactful Care. And I'll come back to that. But I want to reference something that you said that was very interesting. You said the future is behind me. And when we say that the future is behind you, what you're saying is that there's a tremendous amount of humility in what you have learned. And you're right. Medicine needs to change, and it needs to change in the granular aspect of that relationship between the patient and the doc. There is probably no more important relationship, Dr. Bell, aside from your significant other, than the relationship we have with our primary care physician.
Absolutely.
Yet, it's one of the most undervalued relationships that exists because the average physician visit right now is 5 to 7 minutes. Not only is it 5 to 7 minutes, but we are treating probably the most highly acute population in the history of modern healthcare. So one thing that I want to make sure that I kind of pivot to Dr. Pecora is I reference the fact that primary care, dare I say, is still in the past. And I think primary care failed to advance. And I think primary care has actually gone backwards. And let me give you some context on that. Primary care back in the 1940s and 50s, when your father actually was a physician, right? The same physician that delivered us used to be the physician who treated us in pediatrics, went to the hospital, and unfortunately was the same physician that handheld us during our last breaths, right? That physician in the past practiced what we call continuous care management. They saw us continuously. We've become very segmented, fragmented, dysfunctional, disjointed in medicine. So Dr. Pecora, as someone who has been a primary care physician, who was raised by a primary care physician, who has cousins and brothers in the business, is the future also behind you? Or do you feel that there are better days ahead?
I think there has to be better days ahead. I think that we have to learn from what has occurred and continue to try to make things better. One of the things that Dr. Bell said that really struck a chord with me, because I speak it every day when I go in and see a patient in the rehab, is we're going to get you better as a team. it's me, it's you, it's the nurses, it's the therapist, it's your family. We have to do this together and function as a team if you're going to get better. And Dr. Bell and I were talking about this before. When I had my practice, I had that relationship with all my specialists that I sent my patients to. And I never sent a patient to a cardiologist, a GI guy, and by the way, my dad was not primary care, he was GI.
There you go. Corrected.
To the ER, anywhere I sent them, it was always a phone call first. And they were like, you're the only guy that does this. And I said, well, because I want to make sure my patients get taken care of the correct way. And now people end up, and we've talked about it multiple times, and that's why our model, having the TCNs that are able to follow the patients while they go to the hospital. You lose a patient, they go into the hospital. Next thing, as a family doc, you may see them a month later and not know what the heck went on with them. Whereas if we're able to stay connected with that patient throughout that journey and then bring them back into the fold, it certainly is more comforting to the patient, but the care has to be better.
All right, so you mentioned the key word, connection. You were going to say something, Dr. Bell.
Yes, there's two things that I want to mention here. Something I want to piggyback off of what you said, which is primary, right? Primary care, but the primary relationship is between the patient and their doctor. We've gotten so far removed from the primary relationship, the primary focus of what our energies should be tended to. Quality control measures, help me out, protocols, EMRs, so many different
Bureaucracy.
tasks. Thank you. That we have lost and come further away from primary. And also something Dr. Pecora said about the team dynamics, getting away from the justa, right? So someone like me who's been on every rung of this ladder to empower my medical assistant, be your best medical assistant you're going to be. I'm just a medical assistant, I don't know that. Or I'm just a social worker. Or we need to get away from that narrative where we are robbing or disempowering our ancillary staff from their skill set. That we all have the ability to learn. I lecture internationally and oftentimes in mixed audiences. And we have really gotten into this box where, nurses have to learn this, doctors have to learn this, physical therapists have to learn this, where, we need to understand the crossover, the cross training, if you will.
And to that point, when I do educations in the buildings, I don't only educate the nurses, I bring the CNAs in and have them listen to the lectures and give them the chance to be the best they can be by, hey, you're going to be the first one to notice if somebody's going into heart failure.
Bingo.
And to be totally honest, most of the questions and good questions come from the CNAs because they want to learn and they want to do a better job and they want to be part of the team, not felt like, hey, I'm just the guy that changes the diaper. I can help this patient get better. It's one of the things that I love.
Absolutely.
All right, this is so much to unpack, and wow. So I'm going to take each step by step. So Dr. Pecora mentioned something that was so key. He said connection. And when we talk about connections, I'm assuming you're referring to the emotional connection, right? Mm-hmm. The emotional connection that we develop primarily with our patients. And those emotional deposits that we should be making to our patients so we can grow that trust between the relationship. However, medicine has become transactional. Medicine is not emotional, guys. Medicine has become transactional because people chase money. They chase the wrong deposits. They chase the wrong clinical aptitude. So let's tackle that now. How do we increase the emotional connection, the emotional deposits, the investment between the relationship between the patient and the doctor when medicine has become, in the majority, of the scope a transactional endeavor?
So I think that just like everybody throughout all society, people want to be heard and patients want to be heard. So if you make the effort when you're with them to sit down, hold their hand, put your hand on their shoulder, but listen to them. They want to tell you their story. They want to tell you. My dad always taught me, he said, if you listen to a patient, 95% of the time, they're going to tell you what's wrong with them. You just need to listen. And I think that is really, if you probably poll most patients, what do you want out of your physician? They'll say, I just want to be heard. And I want to be kept in the loop of what's my problem? How did I get it? How do I get better? What do we have to do? By treating them not like they're below you and you don't need to know, just listen to me, to know, back to the team, we're a team. Let's discuss this together. I think that's a huge way to get them to trust you. And that's where your emotional deposits come in.
Absolutely.
What do you think, Dr. Bell?
Yes, absolutely. Seeing the patient as yourself, right? What do we all want? We want good customer service. We want service that is invested in our current belief systems. We want teamwork. We want to partner, right? We want to arrive at an achievable goal. We all want these same things as human beings. So again, to echo the same sentiment as Dr. Pecora stated, that we are not separate. I am you, you are me. Also, here in this point that I want to mention here as well, is that we need to extend each other grace. I think, I was chatting with Dr. Pecora earlier how we've done this to ourselves. We spoke about this self-inflicted wound as a profession. So we've created such a wall, such a pomp and circumstance, such formalities that patients don't see us as human beings as well. So you often see patients that are disgruntled because they see the nurse eating at the nurse's station, and meanwhile, mom has to go to the commode, or, doctors have to sneak into the lounge just to grab a bite or urinate after 8 hours of work. So really extending grace to us as well, that we are human beings. We are carrying burdens ourselves.
Perfect way to start establishing and improving that emotional connection is to just listen to our patients, and potentially not listening to respond, but listening to understand. So let me take the next topic, and you mentioned the primary and the justa epidemic. and I love that. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a caveat on the justa, because I do think that the justa has an origin and a culprit, and it's perhaps one of the biggest enemies in healthcare. And that is the term, the scope of practice. That term, Dr. Bell, has inflicted and has been purposely injected into medical care to divide us, right? Because that's how the EMRs, that's how the CPT codes, and that's how the insurance companies can distinguish who gets what. But the scope of practice has told me as a physical therapist, you as a physician, you as a pharmacist, you as a dietitian, that we all need to do something different. And if you think logically and critically and see a differential diagnosis intent, don't you dare fall outside of the guardrails of what you were educated. And our scope of practice should be the patient. Everybody's scope of practice should be the patient. And the way that we see that patient is through the lens of our education. But the scope of practice has been one of the things that, from a regulatory legal standpoint, has been absolutely deteriorating the teamwork approach. Because you're right, that justa mentality is sometimes substantiated by the clinicians themselves, who continue to shoot themselves in the foot. It's not your place to tell me that someone needs to eat. But yet, as a CNA, you see that patient more than I do. So technically, you have more of an insight on that patient. So tell my audience, and I want to hear from you, both of you guys, how the scope of practice has been eroding the practice of medicine, not enhancing it.
It's, wow.
That's a loaded question.
It is, because especially in my position, because my PA and NP colleagues are the bedrock, really, okay, of medicine. And having spent decades of my career.
I love you use that word, by the way. I agree.
as spending decades of my career as a physician assistant, finding the cancer, having that extra time with a patient to listen, to affect change, to have impactful care, right? But I was just a physician assistant. So I have suffered this just a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will, decades of my own career, which prompted me to say, you know what, I can advocate for my colleagues on the other side. I am just as capable as a Justa. So that's an interesting pain point.
Being married to a physician assistant, I've lived that, watching her and have her going through those feelings of I'm not the doctor, and having to sit down with her and just say, look, you're as good as any doctor out there. Do what you do because you do it well. And one thing I do notice that I feel like patients have I don't want to say more of a trust, but an easier trust with NPs and PAs, because I think some patients still look at the doctor in the ivory tower, and the PA and the nurse practitioners are just more people, like us. They're regular people. It's one of the walls I try to break with a patient, like you said, is, hey, I'm you and you're me.
Absolutely.
And I love our model because I lean on my NPs and PAs. So there's definitely, there's still room to get rid of the Justa.
There's still room.
Listen,
there's still room.
I always equate medical care with the way that we parent our children. And the way that we parent our children, and hear me out on this, is that there's a time where we train our kids, there's a time where we coach our kids, there's a time where we potentially become our kids' friends. And I think the only way we're able to establish that relationship with our kids, what is the number one commodity that our kids demand from us?
Time.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And if we are going to increase the medical customer service of our physicians and humanize them, they need to be able to spend more time with their patients. But that is something that is challenged, because time equals money. We hear that all the time. And I do want to give you guys, both of you, a ton of credit, because you, Dr. Bell, you have taken this mantra and said, you know what, I can do it better in a concierge model, provide better care, more attentive care, do well financially because it's still a business, but affect change in my patient. Because the old archaic illness-driven model that continues to perpetually increase the patient acuity is not doing us any favors. And quite frankly, it's making that transactional approach in medicine just a factory where we're looking at every patient the same. We're looking at every patient as a diagnosis, as a head, as a shoulder, and we're reducing the way that we look at our kids as a whole, right? We always say, all our kids are different. Well, guess what? So are our patients. The scope of practice, what it has done, it has created guardrails to make it easy for attorneys to do malpractice suits. Let's be honest. So if we're going to make an effect on Justa, we have to start respecting, right? Acknowledging and making a concerted effort to look at those referring clinicians, not necessarily as physicians, but as clinicians who have a place in the continuum. And I think the first step that we can take, guys, is we start looking at an acronym called DEI. Diversity, equality, inclusion. But this is something that we forget as an industry. And we're big right now on diversity, right? But diversity has to be one thing. It has to be seen. Equality needs to be experienced. And inclusion needs to be felt. So we acknowledge that we all look different, but if we treat everybody equally, everybody will feel included.
There it is.
And that's the way that we should address healthcare. So What are the steps that our profession should take, Dr. Bell, to make sure that that DEI mentality actually gets implemented?
Not addressing the elephant in the room, but not being focused on differences, if that makes sense. Okay? I spoke earlier about my mother's journey, and I recently wrote a book that's going to be published soon called The Work of My Mother's Hands. And when I thought about, okay, over from 8 years old to 18, I watched an Italian male immigrant come to this country and become a billionaire. And my mother, who emigrated to this country from Antigua, obtaining her nursing and ultimately certified midwifery license, two immigrants, and how they took care of one another and how his family became my own. But today, if we were to take that same story today, right, we would talk about the single divorced Black woman and the, Italian wealthy male, and we lose the authenticity and the shared humanity of the story. So while we are different, we are the same. And that is how we need to, that's the nobility of medicine as far as I'm concerned. My mother always taught me, you cut us all, we bleed the same.
With that being said, media has something called if it bleeds, it leads, right? If it bleeds, it leads, meaning that when you turn on to the news, you see the murders, you see the atrocities. You don't see the stuff that's positive being sensationalized, because humans react to things that, again, move their emotions. If I'm sitting at 9 o'clock at night and I see that somebody in New Jersey underwent an atrocity, my emotions get heightened, my neurotransmitters start firing, and I buy that toaster on Amazon that I don't need, right? And Amazon has figured that out. So if we're going to be change agents on this podcast, let's talk about the good things in medicine that can be sensationalized. Because I don't want to talk about an hour about the things that need to be fixed. Let's talk about the amazing thing that got you to go from a physician assistant and enamored you with the profession to say, I'm going to now be a physician, which is not an easy task to do.
No.
And I want to hear from you, Dr. Pecora, who had, again, you've been in the business for 30 years, give or take. You're married to a physician assistant. You pretty much have a family that its epicenter is being a doctor. So let's talk about, and maybe choose two things each that we can sensationalize with our audience that is amazing about medicine, and it's what keeps you up, what should put you in bed every night and gets you out of bed every day.
As I was talking to Dr. Bell before we went on the air, I think that the model that we've created through Bedrock and Patient Care Medical Group is something that I think is sensational. If you put the patient in the middle and then think of where all the vines that go around the patient, the medical care and the physical speech therapy and the pharmacy and the dietitian, we bring all this to the patient. And then on top of that, the population health post-discharge aspect, where we're helping people in their homes and being able to bring care to people that probably would not be able to get care is, or at least it would be much, much harder. That's something that I think is so worthwhile. And to be honest, I have friends that, are my contemporaries. Some are retiring and some are just plodding through the rest of their lives, unhappy, and it's dreadful to get up in the morning. And I look at them and I feel blessed that I'm not in that situation, because I see how they're in that situation. So that's something that I think gets me out of bed in the morning.
For me, it is, years ago, I had an ER attending. I was very green. It was roughly my first rotation in emergency medicine. And the automatic hospital doors open. And he said, listen, whenever this hospital door opens, you leave whatever's going on, you leave it outside these doors. And I never knew why he dropped that pearl. Nothing was going on, but I am very much in that position in my career currently. I am on the cusp of so many exciting things, still a baby in medicine, although I'm almost 22 years out now on various stages. But I'm caregiving the mother who taught me medicine, essentially, who illustrated medicine for me. And as I sit here today, I walk with profound heartbreak taking care of a mother who has dementia, who was this established authority, registered nurse in her own right. And from day to day, for those caregivers in your audience, that can look like many different things. But yet that door has to open, and I come to bedside, and this person may be riddled with a peg tube and a Foley and a trach, or not able to communicate with me on how they got to that, riddled with that level of illness. And I have to summon all of that energy, all of that training, and the authenticity to put my stuff, my justas, my burdens,
Biases.
Thank you, behind me, to be able to affect care. So that is really what guides me now. It allows me to look forward to being a transformational leader in this space. To say, Dr. Pecora mentioned earlier that somehow patients resonate with PAs and NPs easier because they may see those professions as more human. So I'm here to say, yes, we are human too. When you arrive to credentials, you arrive to status in life, but life lifes and it doesn't change. And it's how you deal with those pain points.
There's a beautiful, impactful way that we can instill vulnerability and humility in our conversations, especially as advanced credentialed professionals, which is just to admit that we also have the same worries, we also have the same fears, we also have our own biases. And just because we're dealing with life and death and doing life and death, it doesn't mean that life and death doesn't creep for our own morbidity, our own mortality. You mentioned leadership. What does clinician leadership mean to you, Dr. Bell, and why is it important?
Clinician leadership is the most important responsibility outside of the patients that we serve. Clinician leadership means that what I model for you as your physician is also what I model for you as my colleague. And that's the ultimate responsibility and nobility of medicine.
The retrospective of that is, what can affect clinician leadership and that nobility to make sure that you affect change in your colleagues, your patients, and people who potentially are collaborators with you, is that clinician burnout. Clinician burnout. Dr. Pecora, let's discuss clinician burnout, what it means to you, and if there are listeners out there who are dealing with clinician burnout, what is a good way to get them out of burnout?
Come work for us. Like I described before, seeing doctors that are my age, a little bit younger, a little bit older even, but I mean, my grind when I had my practice, it was 50 patients a day in my office. I would start at 7, and I probably didn't get done till 7. Then it was on to the nursing homes, and the nursing home on the weekends. And when you're young, when you're in your 30s and in your 40s, and you have the energy and you have the strength, and it's like nothing, right? You get up, you go, you do your thing, and you go. And as you get older, and just like anybody gets older and you feel like you can't do what you used to do, it drains not only physically but mentally. And then you're caught in a dead-end job or a place where you don't feel like you're either helping people or you're always fighting the bureaucracy, you're fighting the business people. And like I said, I've had many friends that retire probably maybe even before they're able to financially, but they can't take it anymore. So it's it's sad that I see it amongst my friends, but it's a reality, a sad reality.
But let's talk about the amazing superpower that we all have, regardless of what credentials we have before or after our name, regardless of where we came from, regardless of where we were born, regardless of what anything. There's a superpower that we are inherently born with, and that is the ability and the decision for us to be happy. So what responsibility do our academic institutions have in the impetus of a future clinician being happy? Because I do think that there has to be a big onus on the academic training, the preparation, and the fact that we are entering a profession that is extremely volatile, extremely dynamic, changing, fluid. We have a population right now that is undergoing what we call the silver tsunami. 10,000 of our customers, right, are entering passively the Medicare system every single day till the year 2028. And you juxtapose the migrant crisis, we're looking at 2035 at the very least. So I do think that we have to look at our academic institutions who, by the way, are making a ton of money of our education. What responsibilities do they have, aside from a clinical perspective, to make sure that the happiness and the satisfaction of being in medicine is something that's never questioned? Because it is, people, listen, and Dr. Pecora, your daughter is on the brink of going to medical school in the next few months. Again, there is a tremendous amount of continued, I don't want to say orientation, but there's a tremendous amount of love for the profession that still exists. So I think we need to tap into that.
So I love training students, would-be students, interns, residents. I happen to have a would-be student with us today, and just having him listen, I think, is fantastic. I think where the medical school curriculums, they focus so much on obviously on the content and the technology. Are they focusing on the emotional part of it? I think one of the places where they're missing the boat is they should take these students and have them go spend time with the old-time GPs, the old-time 70, 80-year-old docs, who the patients love them, and they have that relationship and learn how to be a handholder and learn how to be a human being again. Because I think you focus on getting through college and getting the highest grades, and getting through medical school and getting the highest grades, and getting through your residency so you can go match where you want to get. And then it just becomes...
Never ends.
it never ends. And
Yeah.
and you lose something from yourself running on that treadmill. And I think being able to bring that back, getting the future, Dr. Bell, I said this to her beforehand. I said, I worry about who's going to take care of me and who's going to take care of my wife when we get older. Thank you. I'll be very happy with that. We need to instill in the doctors and make sure they don't lose the joy and the true beliefs of why they became a doctor.
So you agree that having them stop and be mindful about the opportunity and perhaps know that there is a tough road ahead, but that road will also have the opportunities for a tremendous amount of joy.
Oh, there's zero doubt.
And you change the things you change the things in the systems that change things. So, for instance, if I had my own hospital, I would break the doctors, just as the nurses break themselves, to say, okay, you can only work 7 to 3. Then you must take that break. There is a built-in systemic break. You must go eat, do whatever you're going to do. You must step away from the building from 3 to 5.
But Dr. Bell, I have to meet my RVUs.
Well, you know what? We won't have an RVU system.
Now we're getting somewhere.
You know?
So in business, there are 7 words that are the most, possibly the most dangerous, for lack of a better word. I was going to use apocalyptic, but maybe that's not a good word. But there are 7 very dangerous words in business. And those words are, this is how we've always done it.
Yeah.
And they are the most dangerous words in business. And in the financial world, if you are rigid and archaic in the way of thinking, and that fossil mentality puts you in that this is how we've always done it mentality, you lose money, right? If you do it in medicine, people lose their life. So, Dr. Bell, that's a perfect segue into the fact that we may need to add breaks and segments into the physician schedule, because if it works for nurses, it should work for the person who's the ultimate arbiter of clinical decision making. So let's talk about that. Let's expand on more things that we potentially have done before that we need to stop doing and changing.
Cross covering one another, overlapping shifts, shorter shifts, breaks, not just the illusion of we're going to bring in a mindset coach and give you an hour of meditation this month in the guise of, physician wellness. No, physician wellness is a day to day. How can I fill my own cup so I'm able to pour into the patients that I serve? Even when you go down to the cafeteria or you take a lunch, you actually eat, you feel so much better taking care of a patient. So to be able to really think about those just basic human needs. And going back to Dr. Pecora's point about the RVUs, well, then the physician is more productive. So they're incentivized to build up that patient's chart, not from the standpoint of just meeting a measure, but they're meeting these measures because they're already full. They're able to give back.
The RVU model has created the most, we had, I believe, healthcare companies like United Healthcare, Aetna, CVS, some hospitals in the country had record-breaking profits in the last couple of years. And yet the productivity of a physician continues to be on demand, primarily because of profits, but also because of the incredible debt that physicians accumulate during their education. And when I talk about academic responsibilities, there has to be an onus on the universities to be accountable to financing the medical education. And I don't mean loans.
Right.
I mean, there has to be a tuition forgiveness if what is being prognosticated to that student and that future physician doesn't come to fruition. Because what is going to stop the academic institutions to continue to raise tuition, charge more? Because if the government is going to subsidize a blank check, we're going to continue to have physicians who are spending their entire careers paying off a gigantic amount of debt.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I look at, and it brings to mind the physician that goes back to his hometown in the Midwest, and they pay him in chickens and
the barter
eggs.
system,
and eggs, and that may be antiquated, but in certain areas it's not. And they want to go back and serve their community. With the debt they have, they'll never pay that off, and they will never get out of debt. Sure, if you go to work, you're high power, you go to work for, the Mayo or something like that, you're going to make a lot of money and you'll be fine. But there's definitely that percentage of people that really are in this for the right reason, that want to give back to where they came from. There are communities that pool their money to send somebody in their community to school so he can come back and be the doctor for the community. So those situations are really the ones that are going to suffer. Those are the people that are not going to have anybody to take care of them.
And also when you're teaching med students, oftentimes when I speak to students, especially clinically, to say, if you're tall, pump up that bed. Don't hunch over to suture a patient. Being mindful of your ergonomics, even as a young clinician, developing those skill sets early and often, breaking yourself to go urinate, taking the lunch break, setting those boundaries early and often for yourself as a clinician, as a young clinician, will help you form very good habits and establish a leadership on the ward, for lack of a term. Mm-hmm. And set the tone for your staff.
And what you guys are referring to is the mental wellness, the mental fitness of a physician that will, again, increase their mental health.
Correct.
And it's I go back to that starts at the academic level, and that starts as the institutional level. And I'll be honest, here at Bedrock Healthcare at Home, all of our physicians, we mandate that they take care of their mental fitness. We meet with them every 30 days, and we talk about things that are not just clinical and business, but we talk about them, right? Because we have to also manage our staff in that mindset. So I do think the academic institutions, in addition to their clinical education, there has to be, again, a very concerted effort and investing in the mental wellness. And things are as basic and rudimentary as positioning the bed so the ergonomics and the orthopedic alignment of their body is able to be, again, at a maximum level so they can provide the best care. That is incredible. So one thing that you mentioned, and I wanted to also address with the listeners, is we're dealing with probably the biggest mass exodus in medicine, the biggest mass exodus in healthcare, where 400,000 of our colleagues have left the profession in the last 3 years. 77,000 physicians left last year. 80,000 are scheduled to leave this year, right? Even you, Dr. Bell, chose a more non-traditional way of taking care of patients and providing medicine. So this is 2 questions that I'm going to give you guys, and I want to hear the answer from each of you. Dr. Bell, you go first. Is what do we do as an industry with the crisis of physician shortages in a world where we have a silver tsunami? More people accessing care, and now we have less people potentially taking care of patients. And again, I'll add to that the geriatric shortage, because right now there is a massive geriatrician shortage in America. But yet the population over the age of 65 in 5 years is due to be 20% of our overall population. So that is a dichotomy that we are on a rapid collision right now, and we really don't have anybody pontificating solutions. What do we do about those 2 things?
Okay, so to mitigate the physician shortage, I think we need to go back to why is medicine important? Why is medicine still noble? That's the campaign. That's the narrative. Why should I go into medicine? You know, like Dr. Pecora said about his current cohort of colleagues that are fatigued and worn out, and that it saddens him to see them just even leave pre-retirement, even achieving the guaranteed cash out, if you will, right? I feel, even seeing it all, even in my own right after 22 years, I still have a heart for people. So who are those people? Who are those young, new, fresh clinicians that still have a heart for medicine, and why should we? You know, I think, again, to your earlier point when you talked about how the media will portray, what do you hear about doctors? The doctor operated on the wrong leg. You know, the doctor misdiagnosed. You never hear empowering stories, important stories of what, and it doesn't even have to be dramatic. You know, just recently I saw a 112-year-old who lives in a 3-story house, and she has a stair lift just on 1 floor.
Amazing.
And her son comes home, and he says sometimes he hears her rummaging down in the cellar. You know, so I had to bedside counsel her. You know, I say, listen, you earned your stripes, okay? But if you don't want Danny here, if you don't want to depend on Danny, I need you not to navigate the cellar by yourself, okay? And we have a chuckle. And so it is, again, humanizing medicine, rewriting the narrative of why medicine is still noble, why it's important, why patient care, shared humanity is still a thing.
It has to be that, because I was watching a football game with my father, and a wide receiver scored a touchdown, and the announcer said, "Oh, that'll kick in his bonus for the year." And I said to my dad, "I saved somebody's life today. Does that kick in my bonus?" And the point being that I've stopped, and I hate this, but I've stopped going to high schools to do career days, because I got tired of answering the question, which specialty can I go into and make the most money? And I would sit there and I'd say, well, let me tell you about like how I helped this patient, or well, is it plastic surgery or is it, and that it's disheartening.
It is.
So to Dr. Bell's point, if we can get it out there where doctors are human and they are helping humans, and what they're doing is noble, take the focus off of the salary and the money, that's the shot.
You know, Dr. Pecora talked about the clinicians or students getting with old-time GPs, right? I remember I have eczema, and I remember my old primary care doc, Dr. Edwin Messi, and he was one of the early mentors that got me cooking about medicine. And he pulled out a paper towel. He said, I just want you to wear cotton, all cotton. But he actually broke down the organic chemistry of cotton and its importance for the skin, to prevent skin irritation, and how different materials can trigger skin conditions. And I was like, what, 10? You know what I mean? But I still remember that, just being in awe of the time he took and how he pulled a paper towel out of the dispenser and took a pen and did this chemistry real quick. And it was a teaching point that stayed with me through today. So I think that, again, it's going back to really saying, you know what? We have this training. We have the ultimate power to not abuse power, to be able to sit and affect change across the table and across bedside.
And Dr. Pecora, you're so right. And I'll give you the almost the assimilation of the athlete and the physician. I think they're both perceived as being gifted, talented, and because they're financially well solvent, then they can take more than the common person. And I do think that while we expect athletes to do things that we can't do, while we expect doctors to do things that we can't do, sometimes we expect doctors to do more than what they can't and what they should. And I'm referring to, where is the patient accountability in their own health? And I think what we've seen in the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic, the lack of accountability of patients for their own health has again exacerbated the medical complexity. Especially we look at things like metabolic syndrome, and in some of the lower socioeconomic demographics, we're seeing a very much disregard for people's health. So where is the patient accountability? Because that also has to be part of the conversation. Patients, and again, we live in a world where we've never had more abundance of information, Dr. Google, right? Sometimes to a detriment. But there's so much information on, supplementation, exercise, nutrition, something as simple as going outside for a walk during a sunny day and getting vitamin D, for Christ's sake, for your immune system. So where is the patient accountability that, despite us growing in so many ways in modern medicine, there still seems to be a very much global ignorance about how we should take care of ourselves?
I think the accountability begins with the relationship, though. If you establish the trust, that patient they're gonna say, I've had patients say, you know what, Dr. Bell, I don't even want to come meet my appointment because I didn't do X, Y, and Z. And you spent that 2 hours with me going through how I need to stop smoking. And that accountability begins with the primary relationship. If you trust that I care about you, I care that I don't want you to walk around with an oxygen tank, in your 60s because you spent 40 years of your life as a smoker. Or I care that you don't have access to proper nutrition. You can't afford to go to Whole Foods or to Wegmans and you're going to the dollar store and getting oodles and noodles. And so I can't resonate with you about obesity because I'm not meeting you where you're at in terms of access to care. So if you trust me as a partner, then our primary relationship will build such that you will be accountable. You will be a partner with me. So in my experience, I have found that to be the best cure. Do I have patients? Yes, that yes, do ignore everything that I have spent time saying and my colleagues, sure. But by and large, those that have partnered with me and trust that I am sincere. And I think it goes back to what Dr. Pecora and I have said in terms of illustrating the nobility of medicine, illustrating that doctors do care. Right now, the narrative is that doctors don't care, doctors don't listen, and that we're all on a yacht somewhere funded by pharma. That has been the media narrative for my career. So I think that it begins with the primary relationship and the primary trust that you develop.
Yeah, and I'll illustrate a great case. I saw a patient 2 weeks ago who had severe peripheral arterial disease and had an amputation. And our nurse practitioner, when he got into the rehab, put him on a nicotine patch and said, you can't smoke anymore. So I went in to see him, and I was asking, how you doing? How's your pain? How's this? How's that? And I said, so you're going to be able to continue being on the nicotine patch when you leave so you can't smoke? He said, oh, I can't smoke when I get out of here? I said, do you understand that smoking played a major, if not, the role in why you lost your leg? Nobody told me that. So that's where you go back to, I beat my head against the wall that why did nobody in the hospital take the time? He's an uneducated man. Explain to him why this is happening to him.
And you know what? That is why Google has emerged, right? That I have a mug that says, don't, whatever the colloquialism is about, don't mistake Google for my medical degree kind of thing. Yes. But that is why Google has emerged, or the search engines, or the Instagram, TikTok authorities of the world, right? Have trumped our credentials because of because of being real and authentic. People want real. They want to hear the real stories, and that is what builds trust. When I lecture, I say, give me a hashtag, take my Google back, because it's important for us to take our Google back, to get back to how we're trained to affect bedside education and care amongst patients and families, and not assume that patients are ignorant, because they're not. They're sometimes more intuitive and more educated than the most educated of us. Mm-hmm.
From what I'm gathering, and I want to hear your perspective on it, it seems that if we're going to humanize medicine, we're going to make sure that you guys are more relatable to the layman person who's not a physician. It's clear that your academic training and your professional training has created this gigantic comfort zone. This gigantic comfort zone that the majority of your colleagues never get out of. Because it is understood that the doctor needs to stay within these walls, these guardrails, and dare I say, cannot look beyond them or step over them. You, Dr. Bell, have decided to be a change agent and actually be a contrarian to that comfort zone. Most physicians, especially specialists, they have an even more concrete comfort zone, right? If you go to a dermatologist, rheumatologist, radiologist, cardiologist, and you talk about something that is primary care, what do they say?
See the primary care doc.
But they have more education than any primary care physician. But they have created their own guardrails that, again, stems back to the academic training. So one thing that I admire about Dr. Pecora, amongst many things, is, and I say this all the time, so I want my audience to understand it's not lip service. Dr. Pecora, I always tell you, you can't teach an experienced dog old tricks, right? That's the adage. And he has nullified that. And he has, quite frankly, validated that as a fallacy. Dr. Pecora has grown probably more in the last 2 years than he did in the first 30 years of his career. And I think as we talk about comfort zones, Dr. P, let's tell the audience how you have stepped out of your comfort zone that sometimes is not comfortable, right? but you have trusted the process. And I think that we need to trust the process and understand that with the evolution of medicine, there becomes a change in us. And if we don't change, if we stay in our comfort zone, you know what happens when people don't change?
Stagnancy.
They become stagnant
And
and
they
they
regress.
become casualties of the evolution of life.
Oh, yes.
Coming to the end of our podcast, but I think you struck a nerve with me in a good way, which is that inability for the physician who, again, from a perception perspective, is looked as the pocket square. They're always nice and pressed, and they have their glasses on, and they cannot be, deterred, right? They can't smile, right? They can't joke around. They can't be human.
So yeah, when I had my practice, as a primary care doc, and I took care of thousands of patients, I ran the show. I made all the decisions. I chose the healthcare plan. I chose the 401k. I chose what the furniture looked like. I made every decision. And I think one of the things that's happened in this situation is, Andre says, because he beat it into me to make me understand that I've learned to trust everybody to do their job. And I don't have to do anything but take care of patients, right?
That's where I need to get.
Yes, and it's liberating. It's really liberating. I trust that Jonathan and Chrissy are going to take care of everything that we need from a media standpoint. And I trust that Andre's going to lead us into the right places to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that Krista is going to make sure that we have the relationship with the hospitals the way we need them. I don't have to do all that like I used to. And that is probably the biggest change that I've gone through in the last 2 years.
Wow. Impactful.
That is fire. Because it's not that you don't want to surrender control. I think that's this kind of big fallacy.
Right.
I don't have to micromanage. If you know your thing, go for it. But if I surrender that control and then I have to come back to readjust and tweak because it wasn't, and then, that creates more time and energy for me to then fulfill that self-fulfilling prophecy of I should have just done it myself.
Right.
But that guardrail is so key in terms of a buzzword that leads to burnout. What's leading to burnout is that there is this perception of the physician not being their authentic self. And I think for me, that's what freed me to do this. I'll give you a fun fact, which I rarely disclose to most, but I was Miss Philadelphia in 1998 through the Miss America organization.
I did see that
Okay.
on your bio.
Okay. And I sang. I met an anesthesiologist that knew I sang. And she said, "You need money for school. What's the problem?" I did it, got Miss Philadelphia, missed going to Miss America by one. But are you ready? The director of the Miss Philadelphia pageant, he would always say to all of his Miss Philadelphias, we're 50 years out, "Hi, Miss Philadelphia." Once a Miss Philadelphia or always Miss Philadelphia. He called me up. He said, "I lost my speech for a few minutes." He said, "I went to the ER and they thought I had a stroke and he had a glioblastoma." So look at life. The man died in my arms, okay? This was a man who believed in women entrepreneurship, in scholarship, okay? So now I was able to form a 501c in his namesake and allow women to obtain scholarship for higher education. And now we're able to branch out to help families of those suffering for glioblastomas. So now I have a chef that cooks for them for Thanksgiving.
That's wonderful.
I have donors who create gifts, So for me, in terms of guardrails, for me to now cold call and go to these women CEOs and say, "Hi, I'd like some money for my nonprofit. I was a Miss Philadelphia," which can go either way,
Right.
depending what room you're in, right? For me as a clinician to say it doesn't diminish my clinical acumen that I was a Miss Philadelphia, but I had to let that guardrail down to say, this is all of who I am. This is Kiplee Bell that, lives in heartbreak, taking care of a mother with dementia. This is Kiplee Bell that is quite fearful that her businesses aren't going to make it, but she's still pushing through. This is Kiplee Bell that's trying to have transparent leadership to young physicians coming up the pike, et cetera, et cetera. And I think there's so many physicians that you meet and you're like, you play the violin? What? You're a guru in real estate. You do all of these things, but that is the guardrail. We're so boxed in that we are losing ourselves, burning out, and the patients are feeling it.
You know what you just described? The definition of pageantry.
Okay.
Right? So if we look at pageantry, that is the elaborate and ceremonial display associated with special events or occasions that are characterized by grandeur, formality, and a focus on presentation. And pageantry is designed to captivate, entertain an audience while conveying a sense of significance or celebration. So essentially, you're all those things and a doctor. And I think that is the key for physicians currently.
Yes.
You can be everything else and a doctor. You don't have to be only a doctor. And I think if we break and shatter that identity, which has become a crisis, I think we are closer to constructing the social architect between the patient and our clients. I really appreciate having you on the show, Dr. Pecora. You know how I feel about you. And we are changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. Thanks so much, Dr. Bell.
Thank you.
Dr. Pecora, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. It was great. What a pleasure.
Nice to meet you.